Hi there, guys. So, I am actually lighting a little stick of Japanese incense for a change, you know. Hopefully, that will also help me organize my thoughts because I had a really interesting exchange of questions asked and things by a subscriber to my channel, Yo. It actually started off with a question around my Tumo practice and how I got around to doing that and how I found out about things and that type of thing. And then it's sort of in the exchange of comments, which is on my channel. There's a video that I made, I think 2 months ago or so, about Shakti versus Tumo energy, and the exchange of comments is public and it is in the comment section of that particular video. If I remember, I will actually stick the link to the video in the description to this one. Okay, guys? So because it was quite an extensive exchange, and we ended up I actually came to the conclusion that these were questions that are kind of long overdue for me to grapple with. I won't say answer because, it's a really big subject, but it has everything to do with the things that are really actually most dear to my heart, most important in my life in all sorts of ways. And so here goes, actually took a lot of notes because there was a couple of things that I really wanted not forget to mention at some point or other. So I will be looking down at my sheets here. Basically, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things that are sort of all true at the same time. I noticed that, so on my channel, okay, by now my channel it's very slowly starting to grow again in terms of number of subscribers, certainly, and I'm really pleased with that because it also means in a way that I am growing. I am becoming somehow more capable of presenting things in a way that's both informative and pleasant in one way or another, at least to some people. And I've been through a lot and some of you recognize that particular vibe, but I've also learned a lot. And I've always felt, I'm 54 this year, and I've been up to 2 years ago when I started this endeavor, I have been really at odds with how can I make some sort of a lasting monument to all the things I've learned, and make sure that the moment I pass away, it's not like poof and it's evaporated and it's all gone. I would think that would be a really big shame. So that's basically my number one reason for having a YouTube channel, which I think is just the best way, really. There's other ways I can share stuff on Facebook, and I can do all sorts of other things, and I can write and what have you. But this is a very immediate and sort of close up and real type of a way of bringing the things. So there's that. So I actually ended up listing for myself my subject matter that I have on my channel, which is kind of a representation of what my life is like to a large extent. There's on my channel, there's sometimes informative stuff which has to do with the arts or nature or crystals or cards or meditation or things like that. There's also quite a slice of things that are videos and vlogs that are really personal, that have to do with what you could really call psychotherapy. So there's all those sides to the things, right? I think it's really important to be aware that you, in my mind, I at least cannot be a witch or a worker of invisible things, if you like, which I don't really tend to do all that much because I don't want to influence things outside of my own life necessarily. Not without people knowing and not without people consenting and on and on and on, you know, on and on like that. But you cannot grow vibrationally without also growing emotionally. There, that's what I'm basically trying to say here. So I have shared a lot of stuff. I have also shared meditation practices and things around that type of work, to the extent that I actually found out things at one point or another. But then I have to say, I started sharing that stuff like from a point onwards where I started feeling comfortable sharing, right? So I had 40 years before that to do things, to find things out, to determine for myself. So because of the questions that were asked, I kind of started to think, okay, so where does it all start? Where did it start? Which is a personal and emotional perspective on the things, okay? And that's important because I think that if I'm sharing that, if I'm putting that out, there are some people who will say, oh, but I have experienced this, that, or the other thing too. However, I've never really looked at it that way. That's why we do this, okay? We share stuff so as to inspire people to maybe have, new perspectives on things. That's one way of looking at it. Anyway, long story short, I will come back to this theme of the personal versus the theory, or the vibration versus the emotion, and all that type of stuff that will come back constantly in my story here. This may be a bit of a longer story today, okay? Because there's a lot of ground to cover. So I was trying to think at first what it was that I inherited or that I practiced from early on, from, childhood on, basically, or early adolescence on, that got me into energy sensitivity, because that was kind of the root question in the questions that were put to me yesterday. So I would certainly say that I only started being sensitive to vibration. Vibration and energy, I mean the same thing, okay? This, for example, okay, has a very strong vibrational energy nature. Just as one example to represent the whole of the vibrational world, from here to all the way up there, okay? I didn't start off knowing any of this. Why? Because I had too many problems. Very simple. I had so many problems. I was so far away from, and there you get it, the capacity to not only connect, but also translate both inwards and outwards what there was to experience. I got given crystals when I was 7, 8 years old by people. I loved them. I've always loved crystals. I've still got a large piece, fairly large, like this, piece of rock crystal that's just a great friend of mine, because it was part of that particular collection that I got given at that age. And another interesting little element to that particular crystal for me is that I actually managed to keep it through moving house 20 times and having all sorts of issues and things going on, for as long as I can remember. And I've still got that same rock, and it's still there with me, I've never sat with it in a vibrational investigation manner. Ever. I haven't even, because it's been there for all this time, and I've had other crystals since then all the time come in that I wanted, that I needed, that I felt that I grew a relationship with. And I learned, on the one hand, to perceive the vibration, and on the other hand, to translate my perception both inward and outward. So there's really three things going on here. I'm just making this up as I go along because I haven't got this in my notes. I'm just coming to this. I'm trying to analyze what happened. So I'm reminding myself that I should talk about what I learned in the very beginning first, before coming to any energy perception, okay? Any vibrational perception. There was an interest in the household where I grew up in meditation, kundalini, and chakras. My mother was interested in a meditation type where you could connect with your crown chakra. I think basically that was what she was doing. There wasn't that much of a Shakti or any other type of earth vibration awareness for her, because then you go into this emotional and psychotherapy side of the things, and that was impossible for her without help. In her generation, she passed away in 1995, so that puts it back a bit, right? So there's that. We're trying, we are trying, yay that, because amazing, I would never have thought this possible, but yes, we are doing it. We are trying to create a database, if you like, that anyone can tap into and obtain the vibrational knowledge, the methods, basically, that if you only apply those methods properly, you will get growth, expansion, etc. What you want. The personal growth, as well as the capabilities and all the interesting things, the cool things, In a case of a person like my mother, it's a great big challenge to think of her in these terms, because she would have loved it, but she would not. In her life as she was at the time, she wouldn't have been able to come along with us on this journey because of her problems, because of her trauma. I believe that trauma has a fossilizing nature, effect, I should say, on us. Trauma crystallizes us at whatever stage of our lives that is actually happening to us. So that may well be at 5 years old or earlier, okay? It crystallizes us emotionally and vibrationally, basically, yes. So both those sides are cramped up in defense, in self-defense, in disbelief, and in despair, yeah. And to undo any of that, which is of course the highest goal and the highest glory of this work, and I would say the only real purpose of all the rest is just shopping and partying, basically, with crystals. That's cool and it's great, but the healing of people and the healing of trauma, that's a completely different story and a different shop and I would have loved nothing more than to bring this, everything that I have gained now, to her. But I can't. Other than potentially very much up here in what there may be of an inkling that I may have of her presence as my mother, she's still here a little bit, but she knows that I can fend for myself now. There's a very specific, very much a vibrational exchange, I think, between people that aren't physically incarnated at the same time. Just an example, just like this, okay? It's also vibrational. That is also a part of a vibrational world. However, there are so many people, almost everybody, I think, that are desperate to communicate with the deceased. That's big business. And there are so many people who have all sorts of talents for picking up on things that are right in front of them. Emotions of the person sitting across from the table, up to and including telepathy to some extent or other, you know, that it would become really easy for many, many people to not necessarily completely hoax the other guy with a story of this is your mother coming through and they're saying this, that, and the other. And I think in 9 out of 10 cases, hopefully, and may call me an idealist if you want to, that is actually a positive attempt at healing and bringing the person some kind of release and closure and all those good things, you know. It doesn't have to be measurable, which isn't measurable, but the true communication with the actual deceased person in order for it to work. In parentheses, okay? Oh God, there's so much stuff going on at the same time. It's really hard to keep track of. I start talking about my mother and I go into this field because it's also a vibrational field, right? So how many fields are there? I don't know. Lots, dozens of different vibrational fields, levels, if you want to call it that. And I have experience with a few of them, deep and personal experience. And that's what I actually stand for here. I only stand for my perception and my translation of the things, both inward and outward. So maybe I should say a bit more about that. There is learning that you are perceiving things that are different from what other people perceive, and seeing as that not that many people are aware of this type of, you know, the effect that this rock has right here. It's very easy to think you don't feel it either, or not even to notice that you are feeling something because you're actually too busy communicating with this person who says, I don't know. This is the type of intellectual discrepancy that we're dealing with. You have to sort of take 3 steps back towards your very own perspective. You have to, and I had to learn this the hard way, believe me. I had to learn that there is such a thing as my own perception, no matter what. And the more time passes and the more I work on this stuff and the more techniques I practice and things, the more self-assured I become, the more confident that what I'm going on about actually has reality to it. Okay, I talk about reality. I'm not talking about opinions. Whereas on the other side, opinions can have great value. And it's not that I'm saying that this is the only, because I'm talking about reality, another person, they're talking about their reality. That's what we're assuming, right? We're not assuming that we are cheating each other here or telling each other lies, you know? That's not what we're on about. We are all, each and every one of us, speaking our truth in these matters. And so what you get is that brain fog, sudden fog, because I had the notes right here. You have to step away from the world of opinions towards what is real for you, and know that it doesn't mean that you are telling somebody else what they should think. Because that's where you get into the whole subject of personal sovereignty, which is another really big deal. I don't really talk about it all that much on my channel. I've mentioned it a few times. I've done a couple of videos where it's the main subject, I think. At least once I've done one extensive video on this. But that's really part of the whole world that you live in, then, is that you're entitled to your experience and your translation of the things, because it applies to everybody else around you as well. However, there is to be no more dominance or power from one to the other or the other way around. Neither way. That is the world that you're moving into. You're really moving into a new world. So that's difficult, it's complicated, it takes a lot of time, and all that's part of the whole thing. I am giving you a couple of overview points here as to how I look at these things in general. Also for people who are new to all this kind of, the way I do these things, hopefully. I'm also kind of new to this at the same time, so yeah. So there's all sorts of, the fact that there are so many levels, the fact that there is perception that can be forced on a person. There are people who grow up with a capacity to sense deceased presences, people that are deceased. There are people who grow up with increased sensitivity to earth forces, earth powers of all sorts. And there are people who grow up with a sensitivity to angels. They have a given, or maybe it is more like they have a perception that hasn't been blocked. That's probably what it looks like, to me at least, that these are all very natural perceptions. To begin with, the perception of the vibration of this rock, which is a hematite iron, by the way, it weighs a ton and it has quartz crystals on the outside, see? Just to explain that bit. It's the most natural thing in the world. We are supposed to perceive these things. It is in the translation that things get fuzzy and sometimes problematic. And because people have problems of all sorts and trauma and stuff that hasn't been processed properly, and they've never been allowed or able to take time, to process the misery and the things inside, those are the people who will tell you that what you're feeling is nonsense and it's just new age, woo-woo, and those types of terminologies, So none of that is really relevant, because a person in a state of trauma isn't free. Truth bomb. That was easy. But you have to find freedom. That's why we love this. That's why we love this work, energy work, vibrational work, healing work of any kind. It brings us freedom. So inner freedom and more room to wriggle and, more different perspectives and things. So having multiple perspectives at the same time, I think, is very healthy. It's good for us. It's natural also. It's what we should have been doing all the time. And so, yeah, so that's what that gives us, right? This work. So back to my earlier starting point, I hope, this time, because I have to give so many connotations and extra bits and explanations and extra things here. The thing that I learned from my mother, the one thing, the one and only other than maybe a love of nature, which is definitely something that my mother shared with me quite a lot. The thing I learned was focus. It's really simple, but I have been, that's the single one and only sort of a trait or ability that I have, that I know that I have trained since I was 12, basically, with her, and no other techniques, no other methodologies, no other approaches ever really worked that much, other than that I said at the beginning that my mother had a fondness for crown chakra type vibrations. That was what she was most easily, she was looking for solutions. She was desperate basically most of my life. So there was a burden right there for both of us. And she was a Taurus, and she was a really strong, an immeasurably strong woman. So she had many great characteristics, and she shouldn't have really had to suffer that much. And I'm still, I regret that. I will always regret that. But she had this capacity of, she taught me how to concentrate on something. That looks like a very simple, it's a very simple aspect of things. You wouldn't really think about that, would you? However, whenever I am, for example, trying to write something, or even making a vlog like this, I sound less totally in control, which is not the same as focused, because I have so many things that I want to offer that are all sort of relevant or important. So I may sound less than perfectly in control, though, yes. However, this is a good example of the focus that I do have to bring as many of the goodness things, as many of the good things as possible into the screen, into the internet, as I can in each session. And I rely a lot less on focus nowadays than I used to when I was a kid, for example. My early adulthood was spent, studying and gaining information and putting things together. I remember doing a lot of, when I had periods after I finished studying at university, I spent a couple of years basically at home because my mother was still alive then and she needed a lot of care. I basically did a lot of reading, and I went to the library back in those days, this was the late 80s, and picked up books and made copies of things and wrote out things and used to collect information, in particular around witchcraft and natural remedies and astrology, those types of things. And I remember feeling really frustrated because I wasn't getting any closer to the heart of the business. And I wish I could say now to that person, me, back then, it'll be all right, it'll come, only it'll take a bit more doing, because that's one other thing that I could really, give to anybody who is into this type of stuff. You will get better as you grow. If you just keep at it. Concentration was the one thing that I got from home, okay? That I use basically still every day to meditate, certainly, and to connect and to know where I am supposed to be going with the things. Okay, so I have said, I think I have talked about 2/3 of the things. Let me just have a check here for a second. So I didn't used to be sensitive to energy at all because of the dealing with trauma business. I did follow an intuition or energy sensitivity training course for 1 year, a long time after my mother had passed away, and this was probably in around 2010 or thereabouts. I learned maybe 2 or 3 things that I still regularly use that were really worthwhile in that course. So that was a whole year of Saturdays, whole Saturdays spent in another part of the country and driving there, to learn only a very few tiny sort of technical little approaches that were useful and that I can still sometimes pick up, it was like picking up a couple of tips, really. So let me get onto that, because I didn't think I learned. Oh yeah, I went into that. I learned then to maybe not necessarily determine what energy is mine and what energy belongs to somebody else. Not determine. I learned to make a boundary for myself where, and this is a particular exercise that I've described a few times already, but I will describe it again because it's really useful. That I learned on that course. It is the what we used to call the exercise of the rose, where you sit and you ground yourself, you connect your root chakra or your tailbone to the heart of the earth, through the earth like that. And then you sit like that on top of your ground connection, your earth line connection. And you visualize your aura going outward from you like that. You position a rose, a living rose flower at the end of your aura, on the edge of your aura like that. And then the thing is that you ask, basically, you don't even have to see anything or determine anything in this stage of affairs. You ask for inside, non-verbally, for the energy that is in between the rose and yourself, the energy in here that does not belong to you. You ask for it to move outside, back to where it came from, basically. And then after that, you ask for the energy that does belong with you, that isn't within the area of the aura, but outside, so that has gone with other people or events or stories or whatever it is. You ask for that energy to be transferred to a sort of a solar chakra kind of a point up here at the top of your aura. So it's like where the highest point of your aura, if your aura goes like this, my arms are too short, but that's where that solar area would be. I have done this quite a number of times. What happens is that the energy that is really yours, that is historically and personally yours, and that you really need basically to function properly, but it is outside, it's out there because it's gone on a ride with people. That's what tends to happen in a conversation, or because people are worried, or because people are having a hard time for whatever reason. You tend to give away too much energy in that type of situation in ways that are really not productive. We sell ourselves out. It's a very natural phenomenon. So that energy, if you ask it to return to this solar area up here, what happens is it gets neutralized. It becomes available to your own system again without it bringing all sorts of imprints with it from the people where it's been staying with, the people that it's been traipsing along with for no reason at all, only because you care or because they care or whatever. So it has to go up here. You cannot just ask it to come back to you, because then you get all their front door, hang on a second. Okie dokie, so that's all seen to. that energy has to be neutralized, and then it becomes available to you again. So I can still do this. It's basically the single, it's not really a single thing, because there's a couple of aspects to this whole exercise. It's a really priceless, useful exercise that I've actually saved my life a couple of times with this, because I am not a very, what with trauma, one thing is you don't have boundaries, or your boundaries suck, So emotionally, it tends to be really easy to just let everything get to you and sell yourself out and so on and so forth. So that was the one thing. The sun up there I still find useful. The activity of the grounding I still find particularly useful. That's actually how I got into Shakti work. So I grew up with the terminology, okay? The Kundalini and the Shakti and the chakras and all that. I just grew up with that. Only I had no real way of making progress with it. I didn't have a practice. I didn't have, not like nowadays. I used to basically revisit a sort of a crown chakra vibration that I found fairly easy to get to. That I have done for many years before getting into this intuitive course that I mentioned just now, where I learned about the rose. Actually, I found a couple of those other exercises that we used to meditation-wise do in that course, I found really interesting. It was like coming home to a large extent, only there was so much personal stuff going on. I went to that course with colleagues with whom I didn't have the most, mutual, perfect relationship that I would have desired, certainly. So there was that as well, not only for me, for them also. So it wasn't, I picked up what I could pick up back in those days. It was only after I said goodbye to all that, to the people, to the circumstances that we were in, that I started pulling all my endeavors towards myself, really, and started, processing things. I started journaling really seriously, and now I am talking from 2013 onwards. So that's in the recent decade that I'm actually talking about, that I made any significant real progress, myself, in all sorts of, in terms of also integrating the perceptions, the translations, and the communications, and all the rest of it. It has to all come together, preferably. If you work towards that, if that's what you want, that's what you will get eventually. At some point, I promise you that you can do this. It just it takes it. I remember how desperate I was in 2013 with all the things. Oh dear, yeah. So I was desperate because I lacked a certain number of elements in order to get the picture properly put together, to get this progress, to get this growth, to get the expansion that I can sort of share now, if possible. I wasn't capable of doing that. And so there's a large nugget that's sitting right in the middle of that story from 2013 onwards that actually has to do with past lives, I'm sorry, and soul retrieval. There's a couple of videos that have to do with past lives on my channel. There's a playlist there as well, because it's a huge subject to me. I could and I should probably revisit the whole theme again, because it's been a while since I really went into this in any detail. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. That's my conclusion in recent days has been there's so much more going on than meets the eye that I have very little doubts as to that. The world is so much bigger and there's so much more stuff in it that you can't see, that the vibration of my big frontal hematite iron here is about this is like boiling an egg and eating it. It is totally basic, So in terms of levels, we're talking about the levels of how spaced out you can get. So there's lots of people who bring very spacey stuff, which doesn't always necessarily have to be either true or relevant to a person. You have to have some type of critical mind, I think. I'm sorry to say. But maybe not. Maybe it doesn't matter to that person. It's all personal. But there are things that even though we experience them differently, what we are experiencing is actually the same thing. The world of the crown chakra is the same for everybody. But it doesn't mean that it feels the same or that you are going to speak of it in the same way. So that's difficult. It's complicated, yes. And nobody said it was going to be easy. All through the years, other than the things I have described so far, learning to concentrate, learning to work a bit in types of crown chakra type environments where I really discovered how it felt to have that type of that I could really sort of align myself with a different type of field, really, and that I would feel different. That's what I learned from there. And then this course that I described earlier about like these aura experiences and experience of being grounded or not, the levels of the where the chakras actually also fit in, all that type of stuff, I became more and more familiar with. I basically became familiar with what it felt like, step by step, through the years. And all through the years, I've used crystals, more and more, actually. So that's how I got to this. And I suppose I was really lucky in many ways that I got to follow the path that I'm on, and it's been hell of a ride. And this whole soul retrieval thing is even more crazy than any. So I don't dismiss things very quickly anymore, because I don't think that it is my position to dismiss anything. However, you can often tell if somebody is having you on. That's a different thing altogether. About the Shakti. I'm thinking here, I remember, of course, because I've referred to it several more times later on, there's a Shakti energy work playlist on my channel as well. I started what I call my Shakti energy work in the very early beginning of 2019. So we're moving for fast forward, right? Through the crystals and the journaling and the soul retrieval and all that. Everything has become that much more integrated for me that I could actually move forward to do Shakti work. I have, I suppose I should really say, resented the way it was brought to me on the internet, that you should really be afraid of your Kundalini energy or distrustful of it. and that you would absolutely need somebody else to set your feet on the right path, and so on and so forth. And that in many, many, many cases, people went all crazy out, and had all sorts of problems and pains and body problems and issues and what have you, because they went into Kundalini meditation and messed it up. So I never felt like I never wanted to have any truck with any of that. I suppose that there are A, people, and B, situations where you should be paying attention. You should always pay attention with this type of stuff. By now, fast forward to, April 8, 2020, I'm actually a year and 3 months into a Shakti work process that I have paid attention to, I think, every single day since in that period, okay? Every single day. There has not been a day, maybe one, or, once in a while, but 6 days out of 7, I have paid some attention or other to my Shakti energy and the way I relate to that. There's another translation issue going on right there. How it feels, what I register, how I can describe that to myself, what happens really in terms of, does any particular imagery come to me? Do I have weird dreams? What happens? Are my thoughts triggered in one way or another? How do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel? And again and again. If I feel good, I'm not worried. It's that simple. You have to dare to choose your own well-being above everything else. That's a big deal right there. So I'm sure that if you bet on your own well-being, it means trusting, right? It means, I have just recently gone through a difficult episode with my tonsils, which used to be a big problem. And I have managed to carry myself through that period with a lot of trust in my body. My body knows best. This here knows how it's supposed to go. And if I have a problem with my tonsils, it's because, a couple of things. It has to do with my lymphatic system. There are things that I have to do. I have to drink enough hot water during the day, otherwise I get in trouble again. There's more intel in the health playlist on my channel as well. So it's all connected, right? The emotional life, the physical life, and the Shakti energy that's really part of who you are. It was there all along. It's been there all your life. So it's not like it isn't yours or you belong to it, just depending on how you want to look at it. There shouldn't really... the one thing that I've noticed in terms of when it comes to who should be in a position to tell another person things, a certain amount of Shakti energy, especially when it becomes more and more integrated in your life, makes you a lot less easy to govern. So it makes you more willful, more adventurous, stronger, gives you a lot of courage, and you are less and less willing to put up with a lot of nonsense. whether it is from individual people or from hierarchical structures in whichever way that applies. So now I would like to let you think about the implications of that for example, a priesthood. It's pretty obvious. If all of us are suddenly starting to think for ourselves and we're going to, which would be a good thing, what with, the present situation of the world, lots of people are doing their own thinking, are coming to their own conclusions, are developing new initiatives to help each other, to do things together, to work together. And it's working fine. It doesn't necessarily mean that hierarchy or power is always a bad thing. I don't like power. Let's just say hierarchy, okay? It's the same thing. Yeah, it's difficult. We will have to figure this out together. So, but Shakti energy work, Kundalini work, the energy inside you just doesn't work with nonsense anymore. So if somebody has power over us, or you're in, God forbid, in a situation where you have to sit there and watch other people being abused, people letting themselves be abused, that's going to hurt. That's the type of knowledge that you, the end of this line, are coming to, that can be really uncomfortable. However, Tumo is like a next level step in this. There's more Tumo videos on my channel as well. I will get back to that, because I do have a couple more pointers as to Tumo versus Shakti, which is, I think, really worthwhile to go on talking about. It's over 50 minutes in here. I want to get back to my little questions here that this person was so kind to write down for me on the so the drills and exercises, how to feel energy in the body. How do you precisely know how to feel what energy does not belong to you? I thought that was a really interesting one. It's a separate one, separate video. I'm going to come back to that. Nobody taught me Tumo, because I found it out how to do it by accident. I think it has to do with my past lives. So, woozy, new age, weirdo, Aquarian age. Oh yeah, another interesting one was mentioned about the transmission of energy. Whether Shaktipat, if I do a Shaktipat here, you can pick up on that. You can feel it. You are not picking up on my Shakti. My Shakti is talking to yours, in a nutshell. Okay, so it's your Shakti which is spoken to non-verbally. All of a sudden, it recognizes the language, so to speak, of the Shaktipat, and it comes up and it comes, hey, like, here I am, and what do you want to go do now? That's what that does. So there is no real, it isn't that person B is actually incorporating foreign to them energy. Not on this level. That doesn't work. That's a possibility, but not with Shakti. Shakti doesn't do this. You have plenty of your own. And so that's what a Shaktipat really does. I have had some experience with this by now, so it's easy. It's also, I suppose, possible eventually to manipulate this type of stuff, which sounds like a really bad idea to me. But that is really next level magic right there. And there's another point that has to do with the moral sides of Shakti and Tumo issues, that of course, if you are going to be fully responsible for your own personal growth in this field, then at some point you have to have some type of a inner moral compass. You have to know the right thing to do, right? Most people do. It's not, I'm not too worried. We have seen too many scary movies, all of us. One more note. I think I covered that. I covered that as well. Yeah, so there's intellectual issues going on as well as to, if we're talking about Shakti, I am talking about the Shakti energy as it really is. You can experience your Shakti field, your Shakti workings in a way that sounds completely different from what I say when I talk about mine. That doesn't mean that it isn't really the same thing, only in your context. I can't wait myself for us to have a go at this and to have 10 other descriptions of somebody's perception and translation of their Shakti goings on inside them in their speak, so as to hear all that. That's going to be so interesting. So I will have to remind myself now of the things that I'm supposed to still make another video about because I have to look at this. I think I've said many things. So thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Neti Neti, for your comments and your interaction. I hope this was in some way useful to you. I applaud you for wanting this sovereign curriculum. Oh yeah, it's what I've been on about myself all this time. So because I wasn't having anybody telling me and giving me their transmissions and look, oh no. Thank you so much. I was introduced to negative interactions of energies at a very, very early age. And no more. We will do this ourselves, okay? Each one of us. So thank you all. And I'm under 1 hour still. Wow, gosh, I've absolutely got no hydration left now. Thank you for watching and see you next time, okay? Bye-bye for now.